Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we delve in for the fourth day of a 5-day program on the inner work of age and how those of us who are of a mature time in our lives can reimagine ourselves and continue to be of productive service to a world that is crying out for the kind of wisdom and vitality that we, along with the other generations, can provide. Before we launch into our program, we want to note that yesterday was the 40th day since the death of Mahsa Amini on the 16th of September. We've highlighted that in Humanity Rising. It was a George Floyd moment when a young 22-year-old Kurdish woman on holiday in Tehran didn't have her hijab exactly right and was essentially beaten to death by the morality police. And that sparked worldwide protests external to Iran, but also the greatest protests inside Iran since the revolution of the Ayatollah Khomeini 44 years ago. So I'd like to welcome Banafsheh Sayad, who's the founder of Dance of Oneness, whose family was essentially exiled after the revolution and has been living that reality for her life, and has been very, very active in the events in the aftermath of the death of Mahsa Amini. We're preparing a whole week program next week on Humanity Rising, looking in depth at what's going on in Iran, and we wanted to do so as a way to commemorate the death, but also the inspiration of this young 22-year-old Kurdish woman who, like George Floyd, died an individual death, but at a moment and in a way that ignited the world. So Banafsheh, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising and thank you so much for everything that you've brought to our attention over the last 40 days about what's going on in your country. Please just tell us what's in store for next week.
Thank you, Jim, and hello to everyone. As Jim said, 40 days have passed since the murder of Mahsa Amini, and we're in the 41st day of what is shaping up to be the world's first women-led revolution in Iran. The Islamic government has been cracking down hard, killing hundreds of protesters, including teenage girls, and arresting thousands, with the average age of prisoners being 15. In light of this, as an Iranian who was forced into exile 39 years ago, I have organized an intention event for Iran based on the central slogan of the uprising, Woman, Life, Freedom, which will take place this coming Monday, October 31st, on Humanity Rising, from 8 to 10 Pacific. I will be joined by the New York Times bestselling author and political activist Marianne Williamson, who will be giving an inspirational talk, and Lynn McTaggart, the creator of the Intention Experiment, who will guide us into a 10-minute intention for freedom in Iran. I know how most of us have a lot going on and are under a great deal of pressure these days. So before focusing on the intention, I will be leading everyone into a short embodiment practice to help ground and center us as we prepare for holding the intention. We're calling all light workers to this gathering. So I hope whoever's watching, listening to this program will join us in holding this global intention to support, uplift, and send love to Iranians who are courageously standing up to the insidious inhumanity of the Islamic gangster regime for their inherent right to live freely as human beings. I also invite you to join us for a summit on Iran following this Global Intention event, starting on November 1st through November 4th, where we will be listening to voices on the liberation movement in Iran. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share about next week's program. I hope that you will join us.
Thank you, Banafsheh, very much. You know, one of the joys of Humanity Rising is that we have no boundaries. We delve into every conceivable issue possible. Last week was on regenerative health. The week before that was on nonviolence. We have all kinds of programs coming up around the crisis of democracy. So as world events unfold, whatever we're dealing with from a meta level, like in this case, aging, we like to provide the opportunity for our audiences to hear about what's happening in the specificity of our world. So Banafsheh, thank you so much for sharing, and we'll see you again next week. Before we dive into our program, let us pause, as we always do on Humanity Rising, in the midst of all the tumult. Just think of the killing, the beating to death of a young 22-year-old who was just on holiday because she didn't have her hijab on, right? And the scores of teenage women, one of which I read in the news was thrown off a roof and killed by the regime. You know, as Whitehead said, the fairies dance and Christ is crucified, and it's all part of the divine pleroma. And we, at the beginning of every session, just breathe together in the spirit of oneness. So Georg will put up an art card in a moment. You'll see a 5-pointed star. This is the picture of the combined orbital pathway of the Earth and Venus around the sun. And we breathe to the count of 5. So you'll hear a bell. Just breathe in slowly, 5.5 seconds. Then you hear another bell and breathe out for 5.5 seconds, only for 10 breaths. And that will bring the coherence that we need. Thank you, everyone. Georg, there's no sound. Maybe that was a miscue from the technical, though there it is again.
Now we're starting. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, everyone. It's always good to breathe together. It's my pleasure now to introduce my good friend and colleague, Connie Zweig, who's the convener of this 5-day program on the inner work of age. She just completed a brilliant course for Ubiquity University on the shadow and how to turn our lead into gold. She's written a number of best-selling works on the shadow, Meeting the Shadow, Romancing the Shadow, Meeting the Shadow of Spirituality, and her most recent book is on the inner work of age. And it's on the basis of that she's convening this panel. So Connie, thank you so much for all you're doing, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Banafshe. That was really moving. I will join you on Monday. Jim, thank you for all that you do. Georg, thank you for being behind the scenes making this possible. So our topic today is reimagining the elder for our cultural moment. And as Jim mentioned, the themes for this week are based on my book, The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. And the book extends my work on the shadow, the personal unconscious, into midlife and beyond, to really explore the unconscious shadows of age, what we unknowingly carry into life after 50, and how that might be stopping us from sabotaging our intentions or stopping us from meeting our goals. So today we're going to explore with a number of elders who can be models for us of how to age gracefully. We're going to explore reimagining the elder. And I want to just open with the comment that elders are made, not born. We don't become an elder with a Medicare birthday. It's a stage, not an age. And it's not another role to wear like a change of clothes. It's an internal shift in awareness that arises as a result of inner work, a letting go of the ego's agenda and its identification with image and success. It's a shift from heroic empire building to a release of egocentricity, strategizing, pushing, controlling the agenda. For some of us, it's a shift from role to soul, a release of our unconscious identification with what we do, what I call the doer, and a deeper identification with our spiritual nature, who we really are. So who are our elders today? What are their contributions in this time of interconnected crises? And how can elders join with youth to make intergenerational impact? I'm going to turn off my camera for a minute.
You're on mute, Connie. We're not hearing you.
We should hear you now. You're unmuted. Say something. That's very weird that we don't hear her.
Yeah. Maybe while we're sorting that out.
Can you hear me now? Can
There
you
we
hear me?
go.
Yes.
There we
Yes?
go.
Okay. So my apologies. I have a lingering cough from a cold. So I want to start this morning by introducing Chip Connolly. And Chip is going to talk about what is a modern elder. Chip joined the startup Airbnb at age 52 after a successful career as a boutique hotel founder. He was twice the age of most of the employees, and so it earned him the title of modern elder. As a mentor to the young Airbnb CEO, Chip saw the value of intergenerational collaboration in a company that's now the most valuable hospitality company in the world. And he served as Airbnb's head of global hospitality for 4 years. He's the author of Peak and his best-selling book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, became the inspiration for his wisdom school, Modern Elder Academy, which was launched in 2018 and now has 2,000 alums. So Chip, I've been looking forward to hearing from you speak about what is a modern elder.
Thank you so much, Connie. I hope you are recovering and healing from the cough you've had and the cold. I've also had a little laryngitis myself, so apologize for my voice being a little raspy. By the way, Connie's book is frankly my favorite book that I've read in the last year around age and around the blossoming that comes with age. So thank you, Connie, for offering that to the world. But let me start by saying, if you told me 10 years ago at age 52 that I was going to be giving this talk, I would have laughed. The last thing I wanted to be was an elder, I'll be honest. I was still too focused on being youthful, not useful. And I was truly still invested in my ego. Richard Rohr, who's been a student amazingly down here at MEA, says, he and Carl Jung both have said that, the primary operating system for the first half of our life is our ego. And then it's around midlife when we are issued a new operating system, which is our soul. And yet very few of us have been given an operating manual for how to operate with that soul. So it was 10 years ago that I was asked by the 3 young founders of Airbnb to join their little tech startup that no one had ever heard of as their in-house mentor. And I showed up for the first day and realized I was twice the age of the average employee, as Connie said. And while I was mentoring the founding CEO, Brian Chesky, he was also my boss, and he was 21 years younger than me. By the way, the US Department of Labor says that the majority of Americans by the year 2025 will have a younger boss. We have never seen that before. So we need to learn how to actually have intergenerational collaboration like nothing we've seen in the history of the workplace. But the thing that I noticed the most in the first few weeks was the fact that these young folks were talking a tech language that was ancient Greek to me, and I don't understand ancient Greek. I often felt like the dumbest person in the room. And I wanted to quit. I was scared. I guess my ego was scared of failing and of, looking stupid. But my dad, who is my modern elder, asked me how might I turn my fear into curiosity. And that's when I made a shift. A couple of months into the job, the founders pulled me aside and said, Chip, we hired you for your knowledge, but what we've really gained from you is your wisdom. You are our modern elder. My reaction was swift. I was like, I don't want to be a modern elder. That sounds like AARP's magazine. But then they gave me the punchline that has really opened the door for the rest of my life. They said, Chip, a modern elder is as curious as they are wise. Curiosity opens up possibilities, and wisdom distills down what's essential. And once I heard that, I was like, okay, I will be your modern elder, I guess. During my time at Airbnb, I really started to recognize that a new kind of elder was emerging in the workplace. Not necessarily the elder of the past who was regarded with reverence. No, what is striking about the modern elder is their relevance, not necessarily their reverence, it's the relevance, their ability to use timeless wisdom to address modern day problems. Maybe it's time in the workplace we value wisdom as much as we do disruption. And yes, I think it's time we reclaim the word elder, but gave it a modern twist. The modern elder is as much an intern as they are a mentor. I think of myself as a mentor and intern, teacher and student. The modern elder realizes that in a world that is changing at increasing speed, their beginner's mind and catalytic curiosity is a life-affirming elixir for both themselves and everybody around them. And the future of the workplace is no doubt all about intergenerational collaboration, since we have 5 generations in the workplace for the first time. This is why we created the Modern Elder Academy, a midlife wisdom school with a beachfront campus down where I am right now in Baja California Sur, and soon to be 2 campuses in the Santa Fe, New Mexico area, where modern elders will be learning from indigenous elders. We have all kinds of teenage prep schools for adulthood, don't we? They're prep schools helping people in their adolescent years understand the process of becoming an adult. But where are our prep schools for elderhood? Management theorist Peter Drucker coined the term knowledge worker the year before I was born. I was born in 1960, and he coined that term in 1959. But the reality is today we are awash in both knowledge and knowledge workers. Where are the wisdom workers? Those that have metabolized their experience that leads them to offering distilled compassion to others. Being a wisdom school, we do focus on the cultivation and harvesting of wisdom. And we've created a crucible where wisdom is not taught, but it's shared. Our 4 curriculum pillars, based upon ample social science research, are reframing aging, how to move from a fixed to a growth mindset, which is particularly important as we get older, learning to navigate the transitions of midlife and beyond, and empowering a regenerative, not a retiring lifestyle, both for ourselves and for the planet. I'm coming to you from our Baja campus, where we will be, by the end of this year, reaching 3,000 alumni, alumni from 40 countries who've come here. And on the back wall there are photos that grace the walls of those alums. And over half of our people have been on some form of financial aid we provide them, because socioeconomic diversity is exceptionally important for elderhood. I'm afraid I'll be having to leave this course today at the top of the hour, because I'll be teaching this week's cohort here in Baja. But I really deeply appreciate Connie's invitation and Jim's invitation. In sum, with 5 generations in today's workplace, we can either operate as separate isolationist countries, the gender gap, as it's called, or we can find ways to bridge these generational borders and delight in learning from people who are both older and younger than us. This is the new form of a sharing economy. And I hope that all of you will aspire to being an elder, whether you're a modern elder or just an elder, because it is a beautiful role to have later in life. Thank you so much, Connie. I will take myself off video and audio and just be listening.
Hang on one sec, Chip. So
Yeah.
I'd love to respond. So early in your comments, I was so touched by your resistance to the word elder. And we spoke earlier in the week about the inner ageist, the shadow character that I call the inner ageist. Yeah. And so many of us have to kind of get through that resistance to really be able to move into this new archetype. Because if we are continuing to want to be young, youthful, ageless, we're really going to miss out on this opportunity. We won't have the motivation to go to the Modern Elder Academy because we'll be put off, in denial of the transition. And there were a number of things that you said that really correlated with what we've been talking about this week in terms of what an elder really is. It's about this rite of passage that you've created at MEA, this missing rite of passage. And it's funny to call it a prep school, but that is what we've needed, right? Yeah. For me, I found Saging International and I went through their 1-year program. And I think that people going to Modern Elder Academy are getting not only reframing aging, but an opportunity to do this inner work in community.
That's right.
And that's a really important piece of it because of the isolation that so many older adults feel. So thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing. It's really, really beautiful.
Thank you, Connie. I mean, it's an honor to have this role in life, helping minister to people through the transition of midlife into the start of elderhood. And elderhood could last 3 or 4 decades.
Yes.
It really is a relative term. It is not the same term as elderly, which often is the last 5 or 10 years of your life.
That's right.
So thank you so much for letting me join you, and I will let your next speaker offer some wisdom.
Thanks so much, Chip. So Georg, have you had any word from Phil? Or Jim, have you had any word from Chief Phil?
No, it's really
No.
weird. Doesn't
Okay.
look like he can make.
Okay, then let's introduce my dear friend, Kikanza Nori Robbins. Kikanza is going to speak to us about aging beauty. And thank you for coming. So Kikanza is a consultant whose clients include schools, NPOs, government, and faith-based organizations. Her focus is on sustaining healthy organization cultures by improving communication, developing effective leaders, and aligning corporate values with daily practice. She started her career thinking she would change the world. As an elder, she knows now she's most effective making a difference, one conversation at a time. And Kikanza is the author of Cultural Proficiency and Fish Out of Water. Thank you, thank you. Look forward to your talk.
Thank you, Connie. It's great to be with you all this morning and be part of such an illustrious panel. You know, people often say that age is just a number. And I think it's really important to understand that age is more than a number. Age is a process that if we embrace and if we face with intentionality, greater intentionality than having a party, I think that when we get to this stage of being elders, we can step into our role in a better, more functional, more joyful way. I run a group called the Crones, and it's a group of senior women who come for community and come to share wisdom. When I reached 60, I realized that there was much that I didn't know about this stage in life, and I needed some help. So I sent out an invitation calling the Circle of Crones together, and I invited women that I admired, and I invited women who were my age and older to come and talk. I thought it was going to be a one-off and just have a nice afternoon sharing wisdom. And we have been meeting now for about 5 years. Well, no, I'm 72. So we've been meeting now for over 10 years. And it has really been a great experience. We talk about everything, but we talk about it from the perspective of being a senior woman. So if we talk about politics, what does it mean? What do we understand? What do we know because we are older? And what do we care about because we know that in 10 or 20 years from now, we won't be here, but perhaps the people who are here are reaping the benefits or the oppression of the decisions that we have made or not made. So everything we do, we speak from the perspective of being a senior woman. So when I invited people to come be a part of this crone group, or talk about the crones. They say, crones? Well, what's a crone? And why do you call yourself crones? Well, it's a way of acknowledging and embracing all that we are. A crone used to be used as an epithet. It sometimes is, you old crone, meaning somebody who is old and not useful. But a crone is a wise woman. A crone is a person who has been a part of life for a long time and who has something to share. And so a crone, calling ourselves crones takes back the epithet aspect of it, takes back the negative aspects of being old, and takes on the many privileges and responsibility of being old and being an elder. One of the great privileges of being an older woman is that I get to wear comfortable shoes no matter where I go, regardless of the occasion, no matter what else I have on. We can wear comfortable shoes. Another privilege of being a senior woman is that I can ask anyone for help and pretty much get it. I have a very high expectation of receiving the help. So if I'm in the grocery store, I can interrupt a spooning couple, a courting couple, and say, may I borrow your tallness? And would you reach up high and get that for me? So I can ask for help to my car. I can ask for help up the stairs. I can ask for help down the stairs. Do you mind if I hold on to you while we walk down these stairs? And so there are privileges that come. The greatest privilege for me as a crone is that I've got nothing to prove. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't believe me? Okay, you're lost. You don't think I can do it? I don't have to prove to you that I can do it. I may not. But it is a place of tremendous freedom. And it's also a place where just being, my presence is important and appreciated. The wisdom that I have to share is important and appreciated. I also have come to understand that everybody doesn't want advice. Everybody doesn't want me to fix it. If you ask me, I can tell you how to fix it. But I have come to understand that people have to get to certain information, certain knowledge on their own. And so it is one of the privileges and benefits that I hadn't expected is being able to sit with my own knowledge, being able to sit with my own experience without having to beat my chest or beat on the desk to share it with someone else. Now, there are indeed downsides to being in poor health, being older, and that is that our bodies betray us. And so every morning, I have to ask my body, well, what are we going to do today? What hurts? What aches? What needs attention? And where do I need to focus? There is, and I think sometimes about what I could have done in my earlier years, but I also remember that no matter what we do, there are so many people, seniors who die running marathons, who die taking their walk, or who die in their sleep. So we're going to die. We all know we're going to die. And so I work with my body, not fighting it or fighting whatever is going on in it, but working with it because this is the only body I have. And at times I absolutely feel as though it has betrayed me. But at other times I understand that I need to mentally adjust so that we can work together to do the work that I want to do. So in this context, I have to also deal daily with the fact that there's this huge societal bias against being old. And so I will say quite readily, I am old. And every time I say it, someone will say, oh, why would you say that about yourself? Why would you talk about yourself that way? You're not old. Well, I am. I am old, and that's okay. I'm happy to be this age. Then I started asking people, well, what does old mean to you? And to them, old is a mindset, meaning infirm or unable or weak or not useful. And that makes me sad because there's so many other wonderful things about being old that I want to celebrate and that bring me joy. Then we walk through the store, turn on the television, and we see more of this anti aging propaganda. And we see it in cosmetics, we see it in surgery that is being offered. So we want to euthanize our face and our hair and our skin and our vaginas and do all kinds of things to keep us from recognizing and appreciating the beauty that we have today. See, true beauty is not skin deep. True beauty goes very deep. It's like a geode on the outside and maybe kind of crinkled and not as attractive as it used to be, but when you crack it open and you see the deep beauty that's inside, or you think of fine wood that has been moisturized and polished, and so the light doesn't shine off of it, the light shines from within it. And that's the kind of beauty that we have as seniors. The light comes from within. It's the light that comes from experience and understanding and wisdom. And the fact that every single wrinkle on this face has a story behind it, has some wisdom behind it, has something to share with the people around us. And so recognizing that the beauty, I'm never, ever, ever going to look like I did when I was 25. I do sometimes wish I had appreciated the beauty that I had in my youth. I looked at a picture of myself not long ago. I didn't even recognize the beautiful woman who was in the picture. But you know, that's gone. I can hold on to that and miss what's going on today, or I can embrace what's happening in this moment. Because as crones and as geezers, we have choices. We can be bitter and resentful and angry and grouchy because of what's going on with us today. And we can isolate ourselves because we can't do what we used to be able to do. Or we can take aging on. Think aging as a spiritual practice. Think beauty as something that evolves and changes and becomes better over time, becomes different and becomes better over time. If we think about what is it that we must learn? What must we learn about how we approach our lives? What must we learn about the world and how we engage in the world? What is it that we can share with those other seniors who are sitting here with us? I remember asking my mother, why didn't you tell us about something in the aging process? And she looked at me and said, well, would you have believed me if I told you? Probably not. But the point is, if I know it, I'm telling it because I want to share with younger women in particular what they can expect and what the world is going to expect from them and what they can give to the world as they move into this place of being a crone and being a senior woman, so that the beauty that they are can be received and acknowledged by people around them. So, what can you learn? What can you share? What can you do now that you couldn't do that reflects the beauty of having lived, having survived, having grown into a life where you are now the old one? Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely, Kikanza. And you know, Carol, hold on one sec.
Oh.
You know, the crone is an archetype, and each archetype or universal blueprint has as many images as there are people, right? So we can all reflect the crone in our individual ways. And I like how you were kind of reframing this archetype for today in many ways. That the crone is juicy and full of aliveness.
Yes.
And she's deeply self-accepting. So for
Very.
those, right? Sorry?
I'm with you. Yes. Very
Yes.
accepting.
Yeah. So there's this self-acceptance. And then there's also what I heard, a quality of presence. So the crone is not lost in the past, nostalgic, or fearful of the future. She's really with what's arising now in her body, in her mind, in her feelings. And she's interested in what she can give back.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've learned is how valuable um, presence is. Sometimes in the religious world we call it the ministry of presence, but sometimes just being there is important. I worked with a theater company this summer, and I wasn't the one in charge, and I wasn't on the stage talking to them every time, but I was there. I was in the audience. I was sitting with the actors. I was having small conversations, and I was communicating to them with my presence that I am here for you. And I was amazed at how valuable that was to them. And when they thanked me at the end of the season, they thanked me in words that included words like beauty and beautiful, like they got something inside of me that I didn't even realize was there. And so it is a marvelous space to be in, to know what you can give, to know what gifts you have, and to have people to reflect back, to mirror for you the many things that you're doing that you had no idea.
Yes, sometimes we don't even know what we're transmitting.
Yeah.
I get so much feedback from all of my online workshops, and I recognize it. I don't even know what people are receiving. There's this transmission going on. And I really feel like that's part of being an elder and a crone. And crone is not only women.
Mhm.
Let's just say that we can also say the crone elder in men. And many men today deal with the same issues around image and attractiveness, and feel that when they lose the power of their attractiveness, they become invisible. So this is a really universal struggle that we all, and I'm so glad that you brought this up. I need to go to Carol now.
Okay.
I love you, Kikanza.
I love you back.
Bye. So let me introduce Carol Orsborn, whom I met years ago at a Saging International conference, and whose writing I've loved ever since. Carol Orsborn is the best-selling author of more than 30 books, including her most recent book, Making of an Old Soul, Aging as the Fulfillment of Life's Promise, and Older, Wiser, Fiercer, the Wisdom Collection, and The Spirituality of Age, A Seeker's Guide to Growing Older with Bob Weber. She founded the Saging Book Club, which runs as a part of Saging International. And as she told us, she's been in this transition going back and forth around what retirement means for a while now. And Carol's going to talk to us about aging as the fulfillment of life's promise. Thanks, Carol, for coming.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Connie. And following Kikanza, that was really inspiring. I noticed that when I'm with elders who sort of have gotten what I've gotten, our masks melt. And it doesn't matter how much success or lack of success or where we've come from, our life circumstances or whatever, it's like we meld heart to heart. And, you know, at our best, I feel that, and I'm feeling that right now. So just blessings for all of you who showed up today and our participants as well. In order to talk about our reimagining the elder for our cultural moment, I really had to think about where I've come from over the last 20 years, because the moment in which I started dealing with the notion of aging and life stage development was a very different moment in time than where we stand right now. First of all, I was in my 30s and 40s, and now I'm 74, about to turn 75. And it's very different to be a younger person. And I know that those of you who are 50 or 60 don't think of you as younger people, but yes, you are. Then when you're standing in the middle of, as Kakanza talked about, bodies that haven't gotten the message that I'm not still 40. It's like my heart and my mind have gotten the message, but not necessarily my body. So what I want to talk about was when we reimagine the understanding of the elder, which is the theme of today, we also have to reimagine our understanding of the entire human life cycle. When I got my doctorate in history and critical theory of religion from Vanderbilt, and it was in the area of spiritual and adult development, I was looking at how we grow and change over the course of our lives. And when I studied the great adult development sociologists and psychologists and people like Maslow, Kohlberg, Piaget, and Erikson, when they imagine the life cycle, most of them imagine that our characters were formed by the time we were maybe 6. And that when you hit midlife, that was your peak. And that everything following was going to be a sad, slow decline. And then came along the positive aging movement, which replaced that notion with the idea, sort of a romanticized notion, that we would be serene. We were still going to fade away, but now we're going to at least, fade away with a smile on our faces. So in any case, all of the ideas about aging that I grew up within considered older age as marginalization, fading away. So while I was in my studies at Vanderbilt, but particularly subsequently and prior, I have to say, I've been my hobby is the spiritual traditions and the mystical traditions. And I was really disappointed to go all the way through getting my doctorate and not have the answer to what happens after you're 50, what happens in these later years of life. And so after I left my doctorate, I started reading, studying, and practicing mystical practices. And what Kakanza talked about aging as spiritual practice, I was really aided by aging, because what aging does for us, all the things that we work so hard, we go to workshop after workshop, we try and get rid of our egos. We try and be less materialistically oriented. We try to think of our mortality in a more present way. That's what almost every spiritual and mystical tradition is teaching us. And age just does that automatically. I mean, if you want your ego stripped away, you don't have to go off onto a retreat and pay a lot of money. You just have to look in the mirror, really. So when we say that age is a teacher, that is the kind of teacher I'm talking about. But after I left my doctoral program and started becoming more of a mystic, I guess is the only way to put it, I could no longer think of the life cycle as beginning with birth and ending in midlife. And so I expanded all the way through to death. And then I took another leap of faith, which was a couple of years ago when I wrote my most recent book, The Making of an Old Soul, where I had to realize that I believe, and here I'm going sort of in a radical direction, that the life cycle starts before we're born and goes to after we die. So I put together 11 life stages in which age is a culmination, not a marginalization. But you have to put that in the context of defining what is life's promise. I believe that aging is the fulfillment of life's promise, but promise is not how, especially the baby boomer generation. I think, we're such optimists. We've always thought of culmination and fulfillment and all those things only in terms of happiness. If we've gone through the 12-step program, serenity, it's like this what I call romanticization of life. This idea that on the scale of the whole human potential, there's only one place that we want to get to, which is happy. But our generation, I think we're better prepared than I was maybe 20 years ago, and certainly better prepared than my parents were, my parents' generation, because many of us became involved with spiritual practices when we were in our 20s or 30s, and have really, because of the internet. And I went to UC Berkeley, and I Krishnamurti came to visit, and I went over to Muktananda's house. I mean, we've just been so exposed to so much that it makes sense that the consciousness movement of the 60s, Ram Dass is an example, Reb Zalman, those people that were there for us in the 60s, that many of them were starting to wake up, I'd say 5 to 10 years ago. And the Saging International Organization and their books and all of that, we're so privileged to be coming into age at this particular time and stage of our life. So when I think about what does fulfilling life's promise look like, and I look at it from the context of not romanticizing and therefore excluding the reality of what life is, or assuming that people deny life, deny aging because they'll say instead, I'll just stay in midlife forever, right? Or I'm just going to go on that cruise and really focus on how much fun it is to have that kind of moment. But then it ends, and the reality is that many of us are having in this moment when our cultural moment, it's very hard to think about aging or life or spirituality or anything as only happiness, only peace. So I'm just going to conclude with a little thing I'm going to read for you, which is, when I think about what does fulfilling life's promise look like for me, I won't tell you how I got here. I'll just only tell you that I think we're very wounded when we're born because we're separated from the divine. I think that sets this whole chain of reaction in which we try and heal that wound in every way we can, that we ricochet through life by building masks, shedding masks, thinking we've arrived somewhere, having it fall apart, all that. And all of that is so much work. There's so much manipulation. There's so much gaming life and strategizing and ambition driving us and all of that. And as we age, hopefully we get to the kind of place that Connie and Kakanza are talking about, where we can shed all of that. So here it is. What do I think fulfilling life's promise looks like? To go wild, to vault into the abyss, eyes wide open, hair flying. Try as you might, reality is going to have its way with you. Fix what you can within reason. Make the best possible decisions when you must. But as for the rest, do as the mystics have taught. Choose to face the future, more curious than afraid. This is the extreme position where the fulfillment of life's promise can be found, that of the heart taking a leap of deep faith. I don't know what the future holds for me, but this is no different than it was before, when I'd expended tremendous effort trying to wrestle aging into something manageable. Now I'm content to free fall into whatever life is for me. At times, life is cruel, other times magnificent. But regardless, I no longer steel myself against the future, because having gotten the answer to the only essential concern, the question of my belovedness, Saving myself from age or from life is no longer necessary. So here I am in my interpretation and reimagination of what it means to be an elder, what I've been searching for all of my life, for I'm no longer growing old, I'm growing free. Thank you.
Carol, that's beautiful. I really hear you weaving psychology and spirituality together in your vision and in your own experience, and how the development of each of us, of each individual, has the potential to reach beyond our earlier understanding and expectations in later life. And that happened for you. And I had the sense of that from your last book. I had the sense that you saw and experienced something that really filled you. You know, this talk about the ego, I think, is really tricky, because sometimes we make the ego the enemy. And it's the ego that has allowed us to live these creative and resourceful and fulfilling lives. And, you know, the way that Jung put it, maybe Thomas will talk about this, is what shifts is the relationship between ego and self with the capital S. Or in the mystical traditions, between the ego and a transpersonal center, spirit, pure awareness, whatever we call it. I've been calling it role to soul in my work for this book. And it's hard to articulate this internal experience. I can say that my experience with this book in my 70s is completely different from Romancing the Shadow in my 40s. And I know you have the same experience, right? That the ego's not running the show anymore. So I think that that's part of becoming a crone. It's part of becoming an elder. We have so many different languages for talking about that it's tricky. No, it's tricky to communicate it.
Yeah, I just, for me, you mentioned Jung, and it's really not so much about shedding ego as a purpose. What I love what Jung said about the meaning of life is to just develop more and more consciousness. And I think that, you know, seeing your processes, seeing your shadows, seeing ego, positive ego, negative ego, all of that. And for me, as an elder, I've had to learn how to embrace it all at the same time. To be fully alive is what I call it. And Florida Scott Maxwell, some of you may know her, The Measure of Our Days. She says the older she gets, the more passionate she gets. And that's how I feel. You know,
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Love that.
It is beautiful. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to introduce Thomas Moore. You want to please close your video, Carol? So most of us know Thomas Moore for his books and his teachings on soul, especially Care of the Soul, which was a New York Times bestseller. He has a doctorate in religious studies. He's a psychotherapist in the tradition of Jung and James Hillman, has taught psychiatrists and therapists for many years. He's also author of Soul Therapy, Soulmates, and A Religion of One's Own. And he's a novelist and a musician, and finds inspiration from his highly creative wife and children. So Thomas, thanks for coming. I look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you, Connie, very much. It's wonderful that you're able to gather people together on an ordinary day and talk about these things at such depth. So I'm really happy to be with you. However, I have to tell you some things. 3 weeks ago, I turned 82. And so I feel that I probably should belong in a conversation about elders, but the fact is, apart. I don't feel like an elder myself. And part of it might be my father. My father remained a youth. He was a young man until he was 100. I attended his 100th birthday party, and here's this young guy with no sign physically or certainly in his behavior or his mind that he was 100 years old. And so I have a strong sense that we have to be careful talking about age. It is something in the experience of soul. And in my book called Ageless Soul, about aging, I describe aging as not at all growing old, but that we age from the very beginning. And I too was interested in what happens to us before we're born in that aging process. And so I could talk about someone 10 years old as an elder, I think, because as I see it anyway, elder is a figure of the psyche. It's a presence of the psyche that can be with us from the very beginning and may or not be with us when we're older, when we're in old age. I think some people get old, but they don't age. Aging is like becoming something. The example I give too often is that it's like cheese. Aged cheese is not old cheese. And an aged person is not necessarily an old person. So I'd like to read a line from my friend James Hillman about this. He said, the soul is neither young nor old, it is both. Our contemporary obsession with youth and age represents a fall into historical materialism, an archetypal split. He's making kind of a judgment. I don't want to go that far, but he's saying we probably shouldn't talk literally at all about age. That we should be careful that we're talking about the presence of a certain spirit in us. And it's very important for us then to have both youth and age always from the very beginning. So when you're a little kid, it's probably a good idea to have both youth and age, to feel old and to feel young. And when you're older in years, it's important to feel both, to be young and to be old. And these this awareness of age and youth might be like something that moves. It moves in and out. So one day we might feel more old and the other day more young, but I would say it's important to feel both. And so for me, not to identify with the elder myself, I don't believe it's denial. I really don't. I think it's more something I inherited. I see it in my father, so I give that's my excuse, I guess, for it. But it's just what is. It's just what is. I can't identify too much with the elder. I don't use that word myself very much because I want to keep quite loose in my relationship to age. I want to see it as other in some way, that the soul or the psyche is not me. It's the source of my life, but it's not me. And I want to keep that distance somehow so that, yes, I can say my older self is appearing today, but tomorrow it may not be there. And I've never been able to live with a midlife. I don't feel that. I feel that the midlife is always present as well. And it's always there, and it was there from the beginning. I had many midlife experiences in my teen years and several in my 20s. 30s, I didn't see too much, but in 40s, yes, a lot of midlife experiences. So you see what I'm saying? I like to keep that as the life of the soul, and it's something that I don't want to identify with. Or as Hillman says, the soul is neither young nor old, or it is both. There was another old psychologist I knew in his old age. I mean, Hillman and I were very close friends. And also Rafael Lopez Pedraza, who wrote a really fascinating book that includes a lot of insight into age. It's called Dionysus in Exile. Well, I think a lot of people don't know about this book. It has a lot of good thoughts on aging. And one of the things that Raphael says, Lopez says in this book of his about Dionysus, he says that life demands a more psychic response. I think by psychic, he means psyche, from the psyche, to the challenge of the physical body in decline. Now, I'm aware of that myself now in my 80s. I'm very aware of, obviously, and as most people my age would be, the physical body makes itself felt, like it says, pay attention to me, I'm here. And Pedraza says that life demands the approach of the psyche to the body. So again, it wouldn't be identifying so much with the body. It would be seeing the body itself and its complaints and your relationship to body as one of body to the soul, that the body is the soul and has to be then approached as an image or metaphorically or poetically. So he goes on, Pedraza, he says, it might be that the awareness of how these two opposites, anxiety and depression, make their presence felt at this time of life could be the basis for initiation into old age. I like this kind of thinking that, if we're having trouble with our body or if we're feeling depressed or anxious about age, a lot of people are very anxious about dementia. I am to some extent, I know, because I've seen it around me, and also worried about what's happening in your body. Is this a serious illness now? Or if you do have a serious illness, how do you deal with it? I think Pedraza's little statement there is an important one, that when we feel these anxieties or worry about aging or notice ourselves in the mirror, seeing that we're different and that we're older, and there's a twitch of maybe, a pang of longing for an earlier time when you look different or when you were healthier in some ways. Pedraza is saying that is an initiation into the soul, into the life of the soul. It's initiation into aging. And it's a rite of passage. So every time you might think to yourself, am I getting sick? Or no, look how different I look. Or I can't do these things I used to do. That could be, Pedraza is saying, a way of being initiated into age. How important it is to enter age. And that's why I'm saying if we are old all our lives, we are present to it. And it's not so much a shock. But these experiences of anxiety and concern, think of them not as something you have to bear that's difficult, but also as an initiation into being an older person or of completing your life. That's a soul way, I would say, of thinking about the events that to go on in our lives. They are initiations that take us from one phase to another. And for me, I would say I've had maybe 150 phases of my life. I don't know, just to get a number, but a lot, not just 2 or 3. Many, many phases, many initiations that are sometimes hard to spot, and we treat them literally. And so we try to solve them or get away from them. And the alternative way of thinking would be aging is an opportunity to be initiated further into the life of the soul. That is, further into our source, into our depth, into our eternal mystery, who we always are. It's another thing I've been thinking about lately, is that about time, that it's, especially when I'm doing therapy and I'm talking to people about the past, my sense is that what happened, let's say 20 years ago or 30 years ago, is right there. It's only not even an inch away. It's right there. It's a second away. So it's present to us. So time is not literal, like way back in time this happened, but whatever happened there is now. It's right here, right next to us. And so I think that with time is something that is very mysterious, and it's part of this whole issue about aging. And it's one of the things that we have to do. I'll just finish with this last thought that seems to me that I'm speaking for myself. The older I get, the more work I have to do. So I'm not taking it easy. Yes, I have to slow down a little bit, but actually my work life is more intense than it has ever been. And I'm just full of books in my mind that I want to write, and I'm working on them, and other things as well. There's also the work of the psyche, and that is the big work of looking over the past and sorting it out and making sense of it and forgiving myself for things that happen. There's several things that keep coming to my mind when I think of the past now. I've got to forgive myself for them. I have to find the forgiveness. It doesn't come quickly. That's part of the work of the soul I have to do now. And another thing I have to do is I have to do the soul work about dying, about not living forever. One of the things I'm very interested these days in is thinking about afterlife and death. And I have this feeling that I should be able to figure that out, that I should come to some place in relation to it. I often think of Jung's comment when he was interviewed by the BBC. And they did this interview for an hour that just went from the beginning of his life to the end. And toward the end of this video, they ask him about age and how should we deal with aging. And he says there that we should live as though we have hundreds of years left for us, left to live. That's how we should live, not worry about time, but to live in a much larger time span. And I think what that does, among other things, it brings aging into the imagination. It makes something then that is not so literal, that we can look at and say, okay, I'm going to live for another 100 years. Yes, I know it. And some other mind of mine knows that's not true, but I can enter that place, as Jung invites us to do, and live in that imagination, in that world of living forever. Maybe that's what we do anyway, all the time. Maybe our lives are timeless in that respect. So these kinds of thoughts, I haven't put them together neatly, but just these thoughts help me deliteralize age and help me deal with it, really, because it becomes then a matter of my soul. I'm telling you that I guess I'm trying to give you a little piece of advice. Don't identify with all of this aging stuff. You don't have to identify with it so much, but get that space, that relationship to soul that could be part of life always, that there is an other that is you too. And when you're relating to that, you don't have to identify with everything that goes on. I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the perspective of archetypal psychology, so distinct from developmental psychology, and very clearly stated. I recognize as you were speaking that I'm aware of every age I've ever lived. It's still alive in me. I'm aware of the child and the adolescent and the Berkeley college student activist and, the meditator when I began to, and the journalist. And there is and when we can attune to ourselves in that way, there's a timeless quality to these periods of life that we've gone through. And I agree, it's really important not to identify with them. This is why I'm writing about role to soul. So At the same time, there's so much internalized ageism and resistance to acknowledging the elder archetype in the culture that I also want to talk about the beauty, the nobility of this stage of life and the archetypal energy that's available, because that is, I remember feeling old when I was very young. And now, thanks to you, I recognize that was the elder in me. And when I'm on the ground playing with my grandchildren now, I can recognize, my 6-year-old is alive and well. And so, yes, the psyche is timeless. And this quality of timelessness is so profound to acknowledge, and so different from developmental psychology, which teaches us to identify with each period of time. So thank you. Thank you for the largeness, the vastness of your perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie.
I think I see Chief Phil.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a little problem starting my, here we go. That's gonna hear me. Okay, unable to share video. For some reason, I can't share my video. Is there a way to allow me to do that?
You have to select optimize the video and share. Video.
No, I'm doing that, but it says unable to start video. A sign comes up when I push the button.
But then that's the video itself, maybe.
No, so I have on the bottom of my screen, because I use Zoom a lot, it says start video. So when I push start video, it says unable to start video. You can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Well, I have not stopped anything.
Okay, so that's what it's saying.
Weird. In any case, we have heard from Phil, and he may be joining us, hopefully, still.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and I wanted to have time for conversation. Why don't we bring everyone on, and hopefully Phil can join us, and he can speak a bit about the Indigenous elder, because I really wanted that voice among us. So we're going to see if Phil can come on to the video. Okay. So I'm really moved by all of your talks. I think Chip is gone. Great, Jim. So do you have any comments or questions, Jim? I wanted to make a few comments before we leave.
Well, why don't you go ahead? And I'm just wanting to check to see whether Phil, even though your video may not work, Phil, could you say, is your
Sure.
audio working?
Yes, my audio is fine.
Yeah, so Connie, why don't we have a few minutes from Phil, and then we'll have a general discussion.
Yeah, and thank you so much, because I've tried my very, very best and just got the link, and now the video.
Okay,
wait,
then
wait. The co-host has asked me to start my video. Hey, there
all right.
you go. Hey, all right.
So let me introduce you, okay? And for some reason, you're called Kikanza, but let me introduce you. So Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. is a member of the Akanta Ihantokanwan Dakota and Chickasaw Nations, internationally recognized leader in human, community, and economic development. And for 54 years, he's worked with Indigenous peoples from the Americas, Micronesia, Southeast Asia, China, India, Hawaii, and Africa. And he served as Associate Professor of Faculty of Education at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. And he currently serves as a member of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. Okay, Chief Phil, we're down to a few minutes, but I really wanted to hear from you about what is an Indigenous elder.
Well, I can really just speak for myself rather than speaking for others.
Yes.
For me, first of all, there's a recognition of the oneness of all life. And the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And the honor, the healing, and the upliftment of one is the honor, upliftment, and healing of all. As well, we begin to there's an understanding about our soul. The soul has no gender, no ethnicity, no class. That is, that if you really look at what is an elder, and we say that elder is strong and kind and compassionate and loving and just and all those spiritual qualities, all the names of our Creator, for instance, all those qualities. Who is it, a man or a woman? So it's we also recognize that this, and by the way, it's not just, and I want to say indigenous means every human being upon Mother Earth. We're all indigenous people of Mother Earth. We're all members of one human family. So I'm just saying my experience. I think my experience also lets me know that whatever comes in life, including the last 500 years, all has a higher purpose. And that this life we live is very short. Like my dad always used to tell me, he says, son, we're only here for a brief time. And it's very true. It seems like I'm 78 winters now. Each winter goes faster and faster and faster. Well, each year goes faster and faster and faster. I think there's also this understanding of how important relationships are. Relationships. And one of the teachings says we must not rest until we make everybody we know a brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, grandfather, grandmother, and so forth. Then we'll know exactly how to treat them. So this whole thing about relationship. I think that another thing that I would say is that you don't respond in anger. You respond, either don't respond or respond in wisdom and love. That you come to understand that everybody's doing the very best they can. That only through love and through kindness and compassion. That doesn't mean you don't have your boundaries, or if somebody is very hurtful, you don't step back and protect yourself. But we also understand that every human being is a child of the Creator, has been created by our Creator, has been given a purpose, and that we ourselves are fully responsible for all things in our life. That is, when we conclude, I'll conclude with this as well. When we say our name after we've spoken, we always say, for instance, my name, Shunkmano he meado, Shanupa Sapa he meado. What does that say? It says, my name is Shanupa Sapa or Shunkmano, and I stand fully responsible before the Creator for all my words and my actions. We are fully responsible as human beings. I think those are some of the qualities that I've found I've been learning at and working at as an elder. I'd say the last thing is that for me, it's like if you imagine life like a 400 meters, and you go the first 300 meters are, that's great how you do. I mean, you could lead the whole pack in 300 meters, but what really counts is that last 100 meters. And that's where you have to really dig down. Because you're facing, your body kind of wears out, your joints wear out, you get a little arthritis in your spine and your arms and so forth, but you got to go. We cannot allow ourselves, especially at this time when our young people need to have role models that are positive, that are able to be true, to make the truth sweet so people can hear it. Because if our truth is no matter how true it is, if it's angry, if it's resentful, it's not going to be heard. So those are some of the qualities I would say that I've learned as an elder from my elders. And I can say that the elders I've known have gone on the path before me, the other side camp. Those are the qualities that really stand out now. And also the last one is learning to be detached from all save our Creator. That doesn't mean we don't feel, but we also don't get attached to this world. This physical transitory world. We get attached to those things which are eternal, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be loving, to be honest, to be just, Those qualities last forever. Many of these materialistic things that we get attached to don't.
Thank
So I
you.
just say that much.
Thank you so much for that vision. Beautiful, beautiful vision. Much appreciated. So Jim, do we have time for a little conversation or should we close?
Well, no, I think this is so rich. I'd love to talk just a little bit if we can go over another 10, 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
I was just wanting to pick up on a couple of points. One, Kakanza, I was struck when you were talking about the fact that you refer to yourself as old. And it was striking to me because I think as I look back, over the last, I'm 71, so you and I are essentially the same age. I look back over my lifetime, many of the social movements have required new language. And it takes real bravery, real courage to use the new language because it's shattering the shibboleths of prejudice. I can still remember when I was at divinity school and the women were saying that they wanted to change the wording in the Bible so it wasn't just saying men, but men and women. And I remember the scandal that erupted over what now is completely ordinary. And I remember when the homosexuals started to refer to themselves as gay. That was another big, huge eruption in the culture. So, maybe, Connie, one of the outcomes of this week is that we should go forth. Elders it's a much more vaunted term, but I think Kakanza's got something when we just say, yeah, we're getting old. And that's the beauty of the elder is the acceptance of the aging into elderhood, because it's setting for ourselves the challenge of what being old most essentially should mean. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It absolutely does. And the insight that I got from this group is that one of the conundrums, one of the ironies of being this age is that, so I feel the way I feel today, but I also remember and feel the way I did when I was 30 and when I was 20. And so when people say, well, I don't feel old, I still feel like I did when I was 25 or when I was 30. I kind of get that now. And when people say I'm not old, what they're saying is that they thought that being old was going to feel like maybe the way our bodies look or to feel a certain way, but we feel like ourselves. What I notice that people don't embrace is that I used to be the youngest one in the room all the time. Now I'm the oldest one in the room. and that I have lived over 70 years and I doubt that I will live 70 more. And so Thomas, you said that we suggested that perhaps we should live as though we had another 100 years ahead of us. Well, for people like me, if I knew I had 100 more years to live, I'd go back to bed. Because I could do it tomorrow, whatever.
Yes, you lose the urgency of the shorter time horizon, which really has an alchemical impact on being present now. I think there's a paradox in what you're saying, Jim. I went through this struggle with my publisher. Initially, they didn't want me to use the word old. And there is a way in which that prejudice, bias, ageism is the soup in which we swim. And the language then reflects that. And there is a power in naming, I have 73 years of life experience in the context of the lifespan, I am old. But there's a deeper point, which is paradoxical, which Thomas was making, which is about identification. Because if we identify with that chronological age and the condition of the body, then we lose the connection to soul. Just like if we identify with the doer, what we're doing, or the image, how we look, or the illness, I am a patient, or the story, if we identify with the story, I am a victim, then we lose the connection to the part of us that really is timeless.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need both. We need to name the truth. This body is old now, and I am not this body. And these are the practices that I teach in the book. I am not this body, and I am not this role, and I am not this mind. I am a soul on a journey, or whatever name we give to it, spirit, Buddha nature, Christ nature, divine. And that's the deeper spiritual work. And that's going to be our focus tomorrow when we have two Zen Roshis, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, a contemplative rabbi, and a Christian mystic, talking about the spiritual purpose of age.
Connie, I'd like to say, I thought that Thomas talking about aging, that the physical issues and how we look and how we feel are initiating into age. How I've experienced it, and the people I'm familiar with, the people that are talking tomorrow, is that aging is the thinning of the line between life and death. And I really think that's what the problem is with the word old for most people. It's fine to feel youthful and to feel like you have 100 years left and all that, but we all have to really deal with, and Thomas said this too, have you really thought through what it means to you to die? And if you don't have a spiritual life or a philosophical life that allows you to stand on that ground firmly, you're going to have a miserable old age, because you're going to call yourself old, but the secret word whispering in your ear that is so painful is yes, and you're closer to death than those younger people. So if you're afraid of death, you're going to be afraid of being old. And it's only when you've made peace with that, and I bet Kikansa has, you can embrace and love what it means to be old when you realize that the veil between life and death is thinning, and that's okay.
I think we have to really look at how societies and cultures view elders or older people. My uncle Vine Deloria Jr. said, any society, any civilization will be known in the future of how they treated those at the sunrise of their lives and those at the sunset of their lives. Because we realize that the way society advanced, if we understand that in the first 5 years of your life, you have a basic personality you're given. Educators tell you that over. So by the time you have children, you're still pretty close to that same place you were when you were 5 years old. But when you add elders in the society, because that's one nice thing about everywhere I go, if you go Native communities, you're older and you're treated very, very, very differently in those communities than you would in other communities that are more focused on material things. For instance, I remember at the University of Washington, and I was studying, and all of a sudden I looked and I saw the value of a human being rated by how much money they could make in their lives. And so there was a graph, and it went up to around 45, and it started going downwards. And it really went down by the time you got to be 70. So I think that it is neat. We're talking about a whole different orientation that's unfolding as we understand our primary purpose is to carry on an ever advancing spiritual civilization, and also our purpose here, just like our purpose in the mother's womb was to grow our physical arms and legs and eyes and ears, to prepare our earth suit for this world. I believe that the purpose here is to grow our spiritual arms and legs and eyes and ears to prepare us for the worlds to come. That means when I leave behind this old earth suit, it's no different than me leaving behind my afterbirth, leaving behind the placenta. And you can imagine me if I walked around carrying the placenta over my shoulder. No, it's gone. I've got a new earth suit. Well, this old earth suit is about 2 inches shorter. I used to have black curly hair. That's gone. But what's the real, true essence, that part in here that has learned a little bit, not much, but a little bit, that's what goes on with me, not this thing.
Yes.
So I think that society is also what helps to, well, it has great influence on how people feel about being an elder.
Yes.
That's an important dimension to look at, as well as we're speaking now from our own, you might say, experiences, but I think in the future, elders will have a lot more in the general society respect than they do now, because our society will be a whole different society than we have now.
Thomas, do you want to make a comment on all this? You're on mute.
So I was thinking that I had a client a few years ago who's passed on, and he come to me week after week with the dream that he was in college, and it was about 21 years old. He was mid 80s when he was talking to me, and every week, I mean, for like 2 years, he dreamt of being in college, and he wondered what was going on. And I think what we arrived at somewhere along the way was that he was, in fact, this college student was who he was at this point. When he turned 80, he became 20. It's like this youthfulness and this experience of his in his 20s came over and became the dominant in his life then. So I think what that teaches me anyway is that youth and age are unpredictable, and we shouldn't put them in boxes, and maybe enjoy the youth. And it's real. It's not unreal. It's not trying to get into some place that's not real for us. It's very real. And I think that would make a much more interesting way to grow old.
Well, especially if you consider what they say about memory these days. The research on memory is that 50% of what we remember never happened. And so, yeah, Kakanza, 50% of what you remember never happened.
Well,
and actually, even eyewitnesses in court now are less and less credible. But the point I think you're making, Thomas, is a really important one, that our relationship to our memory as we age of what we were, who we were when we're young, is very malleable and can be used to great effect. I mean, there's a lot of psychotherapeutic techniques that actually, as you know, work on memory, because if you can change the memory of an event, you can transmute the trauma. So, this 84-year-old guy having this recurrent dream of the 20s, there was some very profound synergy happening in the depths of his psyche that was probably rejuvenating in many ways to him. But yeah, I mean, would you agree? Have any other comment on that? That's a very rich point.
Yeah, well, yes, I wouldn't say probably it's 100% of what we remember never happened, because we are always imagining what's going on. Like it's not a literal recording somewhere in our brain, that's recording it. We are imagining and interpreting, and every time we tell the story of what happened in the past is a new imagination, a new version of the story. So I think that frees us up. So that, yes, I do think that for this man I was working with, that those dreams and what was going on reflected in those dreams rejuvenated him. And he was full of life and full of new projects and a new career, all of this in his 80s. I think it's quite clear that gave me hope, and it gives us all hope. I think that time is not static, and the periods that we wish we could go back to, we can, in a way. They can come back to us.
I hate to be a naysayer, but I just have to, because I think that this conversation in a way is beginning to overvaluate activity and production and youthfulness over the gift. We miss the whole gift of one of the potentialities of age. And that's, Connie knows I go back and forth between retirement and being here, because I could not be the college student again, the active person again, to the degree to which I have to, when I come out here to speak with you, I have to put it down and have long periods of time that I only have permission to do because I am old. I just couldn't do it when I was younger. There are too many demands on me to just sit by the river and to daydream and to not put a negative valuation on even lack of energy. Some people have been in the chat room talking about being slowed down, losing energy because of aging, and to understand the flip side of what the gift of that might be. And to, I'm sorry, I had a sort of a strong reaction because it's the argument that goes on in my brain all the time. You know, do I overvalue the youthfulness and the participation and the responsibility and the commitment and legacy over simply being? And I go back and forth.
So Carol, in closing, I want to suggest that that's kind of a false split for me. So from my point of view, it's not what we do or don't do, how much we work, how much we volunteer, how much we serve, how much we create. It's the quality of awareness with which we do that. We could call it an elder's quality of awareness, or we could call it a shift from role to soul. So if somebody looks at me from the outside, I look like a workaholic, but that's not my internal experience. My internal experience, my state of mind or quality of awareness has a lot of freedom in it. And as Phil was saying, unattachment to the outcomes, choice, not obligation. It's a really different internal experience, even though it doesn't look that way on the outside. So I hope that that's helpful to people who are listening to this, who are imagining, because unconsciously, you know, retirement is like a Rorschach. We project onto it unconsciously all these fantasies about positive leisure and freedom, and negative, I'm going to be useless and invisible. And what I'm trying to communicate to everybody is the inner work brings us to a different quality of awareness in this stage of life. We can call it an elder or not call it an elder, but there's a shift if we allow it to happen from what we identify with in our earlier times to what we identify with now. We could call it ageless soul. We can call it spirit. We can call it beyond ego. And that's really, I think, what we're all kind of, I don't think there's disagreement about this. I think there's a lack of language for it. So I want to put out several invitations, as I've been doing, to close each session. I posted in the chat if you would like to read The Inner Work of Age in community with other people. There are about 50 groups now, 8 to 10 people. They're free, they're online. You can shoot me an email, conniezweig@gmail.com, and I will connect you with other people to do that. There will also be a conference from Pacifica Graduate Institute the first weekend in December on the inner work of age, becoming a good ancestor, with Ken Wilber, Jean Shinoda Bolin, Bill McKibben. The third day is focused on the climate crisis and what elders can do. If you're interested in that, I posted the link in the chat. It's retreat.pacifica.edu. And there are continuing ed credits available for that. And then tomorrow, I hope you'll join us for the final day on Humanity Rising, when we'll be exploring the spiritual purpose of age. We kind of touched on that today. We'll do it with more focus tomorrow with a number of renowned spiritual teachers. So thank you. Thank you, Kikanza, Carol, Thomas, Phil. Thank you, Jim, always. This was really, really beautiful. Much appreciated. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Connie, and Kikanza, Carol, Thomas, and Phil. It's been a marvelous session. That brings our program to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. You presenters all received the link to the after session, if you have the time, in the email. with the Zoom link. And we'll see you all tomorrow for the 5th and final day of the inner work of age. Bye for now.